Shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Hayawam tawab la atam za yakam yawam man rakhagadal Charlotte, which is good day. This is your brother Yawam from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kayah malakata shamayim kwarab. Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call layim la la banawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai bahasham rochak wadash wa mashana la za kwanim nawa wa mala akam shah rochak, which is all praises to our Father Yahweh, which means he exists bahasham. In the name Yahweh Shai delivers in double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. This is an article on New York Post. It says, wild video shows drunk armed DoorDash driver wrestling with customer while demanding a tip. All right, in which, this is the video pretty much showing the guy with the firearm, but it was also another video not too long ago to where a female had tipped another female. She tipped her $2. All right, and the DoorDash driver had pretty much showed back up, and went to her hotel room and pretty much stabbed her a few times, and she ended up dying. But the point that I want to get out of that example and then this video right here is that the love of many is waxing cold, and pretty much people are going through it, so even more so too, because with DoorDash they're doing like a trial run with drones. All right, then but then also Walmart, they're delivering groceries with drones as well, so that's cutting out that what do you call it, the gig work, because pretty much Esau has no he doesn't have any use for anybody anymore. He does he's going to be using the AI and robots and stuff like that. So as society continues to collapse, all right, it's going to be a lack of jobs, you see, but then also violence is going to increase. All right, so we'll read through this article and then a couple precepts and that'll be it. But this is into the article. It says, wild video shows a drunk DoorDash driver brawling with a granddad after allegedly turning up with a gun to demand a tip for a delivery the day before, according to reports and authorities. It says customer Anthony Valino was eating breakfast with his grandchildren at his home in Vancouver, Washington, when he says the driver suddenly banged on his front door and told his daughter she owed him a tip from a grocery order he dropped off the night before. And it says Valino was able to disarm the delivery driver and take the bullets out of his gun. All right, and it says, I immediately smelled alcohol, Valino told KGW. For a split second, I thought about giving the guy a couple dollars. But when he again said, I want my tip, that's when I said, whoa. I said, you need to leave. The pair started scuffling when the driver refused to leave, and Valino realized to his horror that the driver was armed. It says, I reached behind him and I felt the steel. Salak, my phone is kind of going slow. It says, I reached behind him and felt the steel in his waistband. And as soon as I felt the gun in his waistband, my heart just sank, the father told KPTV. In which, the article, it said allegedly, you see, but we have various different examples, all right, in these days and times that we in, of, examples or various different situations to where people have been taking matters into their own hands. And again, as society continues to collapse, we're going to see more and more of that take place. So let's go ahead and get a couple precepts. This is Matthew chapter 24. Give me a second, just waiting for the phone to load. This is Matthew chapter 24. This is Matthew 24:12. And it says, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. All right, and ultimately, iniquity goes into wickedness. Wickedness is abounding All right, so as wickedness is abounding, the love of many is waxing cold, because before, all right, um, even, 10 years ago, it was somewhat of a, a spirit of, people looking out for each other. But it was much, much more, dozens of years ago, a couple dozen years ago, a couple decades ago. The love of those in America, Babylon the Great, and around the world was a little better. You could, go next door and say, hey, could I, like they say on Friday, borrow some sugar, or stuff like that. Or you might borrow a tool from a neighbor. You see, but in the days we in now, it's been different situations. So people is just on crash out mode. One time it was somebody went to Subway, and pretty much somebody had put mayonnaise on the sandwich, and I believe the customer ended up shooting the Subway worker because essentially the mayonnaise wasn't on the sandwich. So the love of many is waxing cold. All right, so I'm gonna get another one. This is hold on. This is Luke chapter 23 and verse 31. And it says, "For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry?" All right, so green represents life, something that's thriving. All right, so while society is, currently somewhat, thriving, or, going along, all right, people are again in that crash out type of spirit, because it is a famine right now. Shortages of different things. It's still work available. It's dwindling, but it's still available. So this technically will be a green tree. So if they're doing these things, if they're bugging out, all right, while it's somewhat of a green tree, all right, when all hell breaks loose, all those moralities, all those social constructs and societal norms, all that's gonna be out the window. Because again, people are tripping right now. All right, so how much more so, all right, when things are actually going on the planet Earth? I'm gonna read it again. This is Luke 23 and 31. It says, "For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry?" So when resources and different things start to dry up, all right, what's gonna be the mindset of the average or what's gonna be the average mindset of these Babylonians? They already are in a crazy type of mindset. They're gonna be like savages. All right, and that's why this says right here in Second Ezra, the 16th chapter. I'm gonna go to it real fast. Give me a second. This is Second Ezra, chapter 16, and we will get we'll get verse 19 or verse 18, verse 17. It says, woe is me, who will deliver me in those days?" All right, and ultimately, the Lord deals in regeneration. So Ezra understood that he would, be in these times currently. All right, verse 18, it says, "The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death," in which, we're still in those beginning stages, you see, but we're coming up into the time where, all hell's about to break loose. Verse 18, it says, "The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the power shall stand in fear." All right, and ultimately, we're seeing famine, we're seeing, death, which is only going to increase. It says the beginning of wars, there's wars and rumors of wars. All right, mentioned in Matthew, the 24th chapter. It says, "And the power shall stand in fear," and ultimately, Esau, Edom, the elites, essentially they're in fear, you see, because ultimately, they can see that their power is being taken from them. That's why they have to come out, with different campaigns and use their propaganda to ultimately attempt to take this word off of the internet. All right, going up into the famine of the word, But it says, "The beginning of evils, what shall I do when these evils shall come? Behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment." You see, so all these things are sent for the amendment of Jake to change, but Jake isn't going to change. Pursuant to verse 20, it says, "But for all these things they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges." It says, "Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case." You see, because ultimately, victuals, we're in inflation, but pretty much things. So I'm gonna read again. It says, "Behold, victuals shall be so good cheap upon earth, that they shall think themselves to be in good case, you know. So ultimately, you know, we're in inflation, right? We're in the time of inflation right now, you see. So people are still in that mindset of, okay, they feel as if things may go back to normal. That's the mindset of the average Babylonian. Things may go back to normal. All right, then pretty much we're not in the times of hyperinflation, which is going to get there, you know. But we're still in the times of inflation. All right, so things are somewhat somewhat cheap, you know. Gas is still around $3. You know, things are going up, you see, but it's not in the area of hyperinflation, you see. But it says that they shall think themselves to be in good case, and even then shall evils grow upon the earth. Sword. All right, it's been an increase in the usages of the sword, which the sword is just a killing instrument. It says famine. It's been an increase in famine and great confusion. Nobody knows what's going on other than the prophets. All right. It says 22. It says, for many of them that dwell upon earth shall perish of famine, and the other that escape the hunger shall the sword destroy. All right, and ultimately, again, you know, going back to Luke 23 and 31, all right, it talked about that green tree, all right, when things was, all right, thriving, all right, but then when it turns into that dry, that's essentially going into verse 22 where it says, for many of them that dwell upon the earth shall perish of famine. All right, when resources is dried up, it says, and the other that escape the hunger shall the sword destroy. And pretty much we're seeing an increase in the sword, you know, currently. I'm going to go to this real fast. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 15, and we will get verse, let me see, verse 15, verse 14. It says, woe to the world and them that dwell therein. Woe means destruction, misery, you know, because it's going to be pretty much the perilous times. All right. Verse 15, it says, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight up against another, and swords in their hands. And again, the modern day instrument to kill is a gun, you know. But you know, the sword comes in various different forms, you know. But it says, verse 15 again, it says, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands, you know. That spirit of conglomeration, and everybody is together, all people is one, you know, that's coming to an end. All right. Verse 16, it says, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. Hey, that was the example in that article that we got, you know, where allegedly the dude had pretty much went and, which they say alleged, you know, because the case probably didn't, it didn't go to court or whatever, you see, but it's various different examples of that, you know, in the country. And again, to mention that, that example with the female when she had went into that hotel, you know, so that's that essentially serves as an example of them invading one another. All right, 16 from the top. It says, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. Hey, they're not caring about, you know, the word and the law and the regulations of, you know, the leadership in America, Babylon the Great. All right, to finish it out, it says, in the course of their action shall stand in their power. People are taking matters into their own hands, you see, because they're ultimately not happy about, you know, who they picked to go into office. Or they're not happy about how the current hegemony is running things, you see. So they're going to take matters into their own hands. All right, much more so. All right, when society is not at the societal norms, all right, that these Babylonians were once used to. All right. When all those social contracts are done away with, hey, people gonna lose it. You know, it's a saying, you know, when it's nothing to lose, you know, people lose it, you know, or some of that effect. All right. But it says, verse 17, it says, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. All right. And pretty much they starting things to where, you know, you got to have a real ID, you see, which we understand that that's just nothing more than the road to the MOTB for these people. All right, verse 18, it says, for because of their pride, the city shall be troubled. The houses shall be destroyed and men shall be afraid. All right. And pretty much scriptures say, you know, all faces shall gather blackness, roughly paraphrasing. Also, you know, all hands shall be weak as water, or knees shall be weak as water. You know, hands are going to be faint Because, a lot of people are not going to understand what to do. They're not going to be understanding, all right, what's going on in the planet Earth. Verse 19. It says, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of lack of bread and for great tribulation. Hey, so nobody's going to have that, that spirit of, hey, how are you, neighbor? Nobody's going to be in that type of spirit. Instead, it says, but shall destroy their houses with the sword. All right, pretty much going in and, ransacking and doing whatever, and pretty much destroying with the sword, a killing instrument. It says, and spoil their goods. All right, because of lack of bread and for great tribulation, because it's going to be a famine out here. All right, and great tribulation is the perils. All right, perils are the evils. All right, Eve goes into a time, ill goes into bad. So it's going to be bad times out here, and it's going to get worse before it get worse. All right, I'm going to run that back, and I'm going to go ahead and close. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 15 and verse 19. It says, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor. All right, no more, brotherly love, so to speak. It says, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods. You see, because, again, all right, they're going to be taking matters into their own hands. All right, and ultimately going into other people's dwelling places. All right, and pretty much, going through their belongings. All right, finishing out, it says, because of lack of bread and for great tribulation. All right, so again, it's going to be in a time of famine. All right, and during the time of famine, both famine and, the evils, all right, essentially people are going to be taking matters into their own hands. You see, so, just wanted to go into that, Adon Artazaza Banaya Paulos, where that was a beautiful edification through the spirit. While Adon Artaza Adam Yash Yawam Tawab, Lord, as well. You have a good day. Wa Shalom Lakan, which is peace unto you all. Shalom, shalom.